We're having a chat just before about some of the work we've been doing together, both in field, I suppose, when we're going out to our clients, and some of the work we've done together, and some of our past experiences. And off the back of your recent LinkedIn series, we got speaking about how client interaction and customer relationships play a big part in today's retail. Would you agree with that still?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm a big believer in people buy people, then they buy product. But I think the shock that you and I had sort of doing some mystery store visits was that the people aspect was okay, but really, did they take time to find out who we were or what we were about? You know, did they try and explore while we were actually in the store? Or was it more of a, let's go through the motions? I'm doing my job by attending to the customer in the store. And as long as I've done that, and if they do want to buy something, I might fall into the sale. But, you know, as you recall, we visited, I think on the day together, we visited 5 stores. And of the 5 stores, only one person was really motivated to sell to us. So that whole point about understanding your customer or being ready for your customer sort of comes up a lot. And it made me worry, actually, because, you know, there's a lot of challenges out in the marketplace. And if your front-facing people are not, you know, warriors and ready to take on the challenge of speaking to, you know, a customer and actually taking the time to find out what their needs were when they're coming into the store, then I think, you know, it's no wonder some of these companies are suffering some problems. But, you know, that's not to say everybody's a failure or anything like that. It just means that should there be more attention applied to it? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, you know, you mentioned everyone be a warrior. I think it's interesting, you know, if we walk into a shop today, the mindset is you're either browsing to buy or you're going to buy. And it doesn't take much to influence that sale. A simple hello, how are you going? How can I help? What brings you in today? Changes that whole dynamic, as opposed to other professions. You know, if we look at SaaS salespeople, where they're cold calling a business, trying to create that environment. So in retail, I find it very interesting that the focus has gone from making sure the customer feels welcome, present, and is the core of the business model, to just almost being a brand space for that business. To your point, you know, some of those stores we walked into didn't have anyone at the counter, which makes it hard to sort of have that relationship with your customer. And other ones who just didn't seem to be interested that we were there to purchase.
You made me aware of some of the statistics online about path to purchase, right? So from consumers, and you know, we've talked a lot, especially together, about how the influence of the internet and everything going on there really sets the stage for the initial, you know, path to purchase. And what is it? Is it 80%, 83% of customers are impacted by online advertising and online information? And I think what is it? Is it millennials that, you know, age between, what was it, 16 to 32 are more likely to make a brand decision based on what they've researched online. So in my mind, you know, a $6,000 sale, and you're walking, and we're talking to somebody about that, if sort of the lights aren't coming on that, geez, these people are in my shop, they want to spend they're talking to me about something that's $6,000. I mean, it should be, woo, I'm ready to go. You know, I'm not going to get in the way of myself to stop the sale. But it's funny how we found that people were just getting in the way.
We were speaking about the growth of retail careers. And a lot of people these days, you know, especially those stores, are an older demographic of seller or retail staff. And I think they're falling into the trap of, oh, well, I don't need to ask. They're either going to tell me they're going to buy, or they're not, or they're just using me for information. And I think that's a detriment to the business or the industry as such. You know, if I look back I used to work at Subway, and every Tuesday, this guy called Dane would come. And we knew that when Dane was in line, he'd order the most ridiculous sandwich. It's a foot long, crab stick that had salami on it. It sounds disgusting, but this guy every Tuesday without fail, 10:30 when he finished teaching at TAFE.
That was his thing.
That was his thing. And so when you saw him in line, he was 7 foot something. So when you saw him start making it, he'd almost skip the queue to get to pay, and that interaction that kept him coming back. Now I'm sure that the sandwich also did, but we know that when there were other Subways close to him, he kept coming back for that service. And I think when you've got that relationship with your customers, you have the ability to then upsell, cross sell, or to continue that relationship, to continue being the expert. And what we found is that none of that occurred. No one asked us for details. No one wanted to know. I think we got asked once what we were going to use the item for. And it just got me thinking that, especially yourself, you've been in retail now for, I think you said 30 years.
Oh yeah, I'm getting on a bit, but it's been a great experience so far, and many more to come. But yeah, it's I found it. To your point, I found it very not concerning. I found it was almost like they were just going, like I said before, through a set of motions. It's like somebody's in our shop. Yeah, we'll do whatever we can, and if they fall into a sale, great. Or was it the point of I'm pretty cool, but I don't want to try and give them any sort of sales line so they think I'm being cheesy, and I'll hang back a bit and let them really steer the conversation. Because in my mind, sort of from all those years in retail, I remember being trained as a pup that you really, not so much you take control of the sale where you dictate what product the customer should have, because it's more important to make sure that the customer gets exactly what they want, so they're fully satisfied. But there is a responsibility on the salesperson to guide the customer along, to ask them the right questions. What brings you in today? And it sounds like a very obvious question, but look, I'm looking to buy a product. So straight away, that they're ready to buy. And then the next question should be, is there something that you've seen or researched or liked that you're interested in, that brought you to my store? You don't even have to expand that question out. And if they say, well, yeah, I'll make something up. I saw a barrel vacuum cleaner that, that apparently is really great with animal hair. Great, no problems at all. So your next qualifying question should be, do you have a house that's a single level or dual level? Why? Because, if you know your products, you're not going to sell them a barrel cleaner that you can pick up and down from the, you're going to sell them a vacuum cleaner that's a hand stick probably that they can go up the steps with, or something like that. That whole exploration of the sale. And I don't know whether we should say it's a lost art in terms of selling, but what you described with your friend coming in with the crab stick, the foot-long crab stick, that creates sort of some level of advocacy for that guy, because he knows when he's having a terrible day, he can rely on one thing. He can rely on Simon getting his crab stick ready. Yeah. And, I know it sounds a bit weird, but getting that ready. And so it's the path to purchase is easy, it's quick, and he gets what he wants.
The other part of it, he said it isn't a lost art, and it almost is, because if I'm selling vacuums, and that was the first point of having a look at this vacuum that does animal hair, my first question to that person is, what do you have? You go cats or dogs, and then trying to expand and build that rapport, because even in a retail landscape, that rapport becomes pretty good. One of the first lessons I think we got taught was that people share a bad experience before they share a good one. And if your experience in retail is poor, you don't go, hey, you should go back to this place and purchase. You get told to go elsewhere or shop online these days. And I think that just quickly to double down on that the art of conversation has really struggled in the last year and a half due to external issues, COVID and whatnot, but also just generationally that younger people don't want to pick up that phone. They don't want to have those conversations. They expect that when someone comes in, they're just going to purchase themselves. And to your point, they don't. so having those.
What is it? It's crazy. There's a crazy statistic. You might correct me, but it's 1 in 4 Australians and 1 in 2 New Zealanders spend approximately 93 minutes of time, right, on the phone every day. Mm-hmm. So if you add that up over, a year, what is that? That's 23 hours, something like that, plus. Oh, more than that. It's substantially more. 3.9 years of their lives are chewed up And I mean, I'm sure you and I have probably chewed up 3.9 years of our lives because we read and research a lot of stuff online. So, you know, the interesting thing is there a lost art of selling because the assumption is people will do more research online and be more armed. So when they come in, you're really just almost like a maitre d' in a restaurant saying, you've made the booking, please sit down, and hopefully we'll leave that selling process up to, say, the waiter or something like that? Or is it a case of, hey, guys, you've got to be better because customers are researching even more than they ever have before, and you've got to be so on your game to close the sale? So go beyond the glass screen and say, all right, let me find out some details about this customer. Do they have a pet? Do they have children? You know, are they the final decision maker? You know, is it, you know, budget? The whole gamut of stuff that I think everybody was sort of put through that sausage factory of selling. You know.
Yeah. Referencing back to when you were at the Good Guys, just for, I suppose, the people out there, Pete used to be at the Good Guys for a long time. He would end up being head of retail operations. And one of the things you mentioned, and I noticed yesterday, and I haven't seen it in a long time, was a morning huddle. Now, I walked past a barber shop that had a whiteboard and they had a guy's head drawn on there, and they're talking about the different ways that you use the razor on it. It got me thinking, you know, when you're at the Good Guys, and when I was at the bank, Bankwest, you'd sit there and you'd have that morning huddle. And it's almost like sport. What we're going to talk today, we're going to talk about the questions you should ask when someone buys a vacuum cleaner. We're going to talk about the reason we're asking these questions, and you do a few bits of role plays. And I think it comes back to that. I think that, again, maybe COVID's to blame, but to your point of, you know, spending 90 minutes a day or roughly on your phone, you're not invested in that coaching or that training. You know, it is similar to sport. You've got to practice to be good. And I think that some of the responsibility comes back to that business owner or the manager on saying, hey, look, you know, I'm noticing. This goes across being your data, and we'll touch that another time, but I noticed we're not selling as many pet-friendly vacuums as we should be. When someone comes in looking to buy one, what are the questions we're asking? You know, Pete, I noticed you had a great example last week. Run me through how it happened. And sharing those experiences, I don't see that much across the clients that we visit and we work with. And I don't see and because I don't see it and I'm not experiencing it, I then see those ripple effects through the industry. As we mentioned, we walk out, we've got an older generation who is expecting to just sell a thing that's always sold and not asking those questions. We've got younger people who are too afraid to ask the questions. And part of, I think, you know, if I look at retail operations and retail excellence, where would you say that the propensity to do those role plays or that style of management, have you found it lacking, or is it lost in your last, you know, few years?
Well, yeah. Well, you think about a couple of things, right? So the best example I saw what you described, and we implemented into the Good Guys when I was there. And remember, all the Good Guys were owned, the stores were owned by individual entities that were partners with Andrew Muir, who owned the company. Mm-hmm. So Andrew, in his good graces, would share everything 50-50 with the guys. But one thing that he was very, very hot on, Andrew Muir was a fantastic marketer and he was a really smart guy when it came to operations. But we were in the US together at a company called Best Buys. Mm-hmm. We rock up at 9:30 in the morning and they opened up at 10 in this particular area in Chicago. And basically we walked in with a busload of 28 Australian businessmen, you know, all sort of quite jolly from the night before, and we roll in and there's the whole team in a circle around a whiteboard talking about stuff. Now, all the guys that I was traveling with, Andrew and I sort of knew what was going on, chalk talk, and we were sort of staging this to make it happen because we wanted guys to invest more time in engaging with their team members before they open the doors, because we found that would be a good way to set up the state of play for the day and for the week and for the month and all that sort of stuff. So this chalk talk that was going on, we heard the assistant store manager, the ASM in that particular Best Buy store, who was a she, Vivian. She talked about selling and closing techniques, mm-hmm. and talking about the basket size and talking about the leader product, which was the hard goods. So a leader product could be a television. Then she'd talk about fly cable, you know, the coaxial cable and the power board and all those sort of fibers that needed to be added. Then another guy piped up and said, but what about this product? And she goes, yeah, we should add that to it, guys. We've got, hey, can we check the inventory? And there'd be a guy there holding the stock list in his hand. He just flicked to a page and goes, yeah, we've got, it was crazy. It was like, you couldn't have asked for a better script. It's like, you know, we didn't know what to expect. And then she said, right, well, how do we sell that in? And so for half an hour, this team just focused on that one product, as well as saying, you know, we've got the holiday coming up. Let's get ready for action. We've got the advertising for the 4th of July sale or whatever it was, something like this. And they set up the store. So for me, seeing that, I thought, well, that's the best way to set your store up for success. And I think what's happened is because there's such a heavy pressure on rosters and labour in retail today, you don't get those big groups. You might get them on a Saturday. You know, you might get them if you've got a very, very large store. But if you're a mum and dad store with, say, 2 staff members or even just 2 of you, it's almost like you say, well, take a mirror to bed and wake up to yourself. You know, it's like that's the only team meeting you're going to have, because really you don't get. So I think there's a bit of a lost art there. And I think no matter what size your team is, there should be some sort of playbook that you set up for the week, you know, and for selling and for products that you've got. Just simple things like, you know, I've got too many of these products. I overbought. Do you think we can get through them? Can we solve the problem that way? Or is it more a buying problem where I've got to speak to the supplier and see if I can exchange it or do something, you know? You know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we go back to technology. I think that even if you have a small split team, you can find a way to record that message or that whiteboard session. You know, you got TikTok, Instagram, Zoom, Teams. I think, you know, if you were wanting to see that small lift, you could make it happen by re-implementing, to your point, chalk time or a round table or a huddle, whatever you want to call it, back in that business. I think the other part of that, what it does is, and we noticed this again on some of our other visits through the city, was that you may be a franchisee or a brand and you're very passionate, you know, and if I look back to, again, conversations with yourself about when you're at Amber, you're very passionate about that brand and you were trying to, I suppose, increase the passion in your franchisees and then in turn increase the passion that their teams had for that franchise, not necessarily the franchisee, but the actual brand itself. And I think that, you know, Gary V, I don't know if you've heard him on LinkedIn, talks a lot about how no one will care as much as your business as you, you know, and I think that's a really relevant talking point. And I think what these huddles do is sort of bring your team on a journey to like or love your brand as much as you do. Because to your point, hey, I stuffed up, I overordered, I got 10 kilos of tinned tomatoes. How can we get rid of them as a group? You know, like how do we fix this problem? And you get creative ideas. You know, you may be like your, you know, Uncle Pascal standing out there with a brown paper bag trying to flog them off. You might be putting them with every TV you're selling. You know, tomatoes probably a poor example in this, but I think that those environments bring that back together, and that it allows you to do that daily training, those micro check-ins. And it does become a bit more like a sports team in that sense, where you are trying to lift everyone by 1%, because then everyone's up by 6-7%. And that 7% on your business could take you from, you know, an average basket size of $30 to 36, 37. And then, you know, that multiple then becomes bigger and bigger.
We're talking about Darwin, and he says that it's not the strongest or the fittest that survive, but the ones that adapt, right? So the really interesting thing, when I was thinking about Pasquale, and, you know, you can imagine this guy, you know, broken English, he'd always try and chat up the ladies and everything like that. But it was funny, you know, with no formal business training, he learned very quickly, because the majors would absolutely hammer him on price. And they would walk down to his stall, which is fascinating when my dad was telling me about it, and I saw it with my own eyes when I was a little tacker. But they would walk down to the stand and they would just price him out. And then you'd go up the road to the majors and you'd see they'd have a red line through their ticket and they'd have an adjusted price to take out Pasquale. So what Pasquale do? He'd go back up there. And at first he did some silly things like move prices around and that, and everybody, like his wife Ellie, you know, Auntie Ellie, just said, listen, don't do that. You're going to be arrested. And, you're going to get arrested here in Newcastle. And we want a good reputation, not a bad one. So after that, he settled back into thinking, all right, how am I going to beat them at their own game? So not only did it become, he did the pricing thing for a very short period of time because he really found out quickly how much that could hurt him as an independent, right? Trying to match the price. So I don't know who the hell it was, but, can you imagine this guy started, he looked grotty half the time because of his fruit. Suddenly he started combing his hair, what hair he had left, so he had a little spiral whisker at the top and he'd comb it so it was beautifully straight. And he started to wear a bit of cologne, brushed his teeth, he started to look good, and then he started to present himself to the public. And this is a killer, right? He knew every person that passed by his stand in the junction by name. Yeah. Hello, Mrs. Wilson, how are you? Oh, Simon, you're going to work today. Here, take an apple. Yeah. Oh, no, I don't want to buy an apple. Yeah, you can take one. They're really good, I'm not very good at impersonations, but anyway, please. He knew the core message, I think, was that he started to know every one of his customers.
Yeah.
He did his own form of segmentation, so he knew the housewives that, carried the bag. And I think in one of the posts I wrote about how he would place the products in the back of a customer's car carefully, because what happened was one day, and I remember this because he was really disturbed about it, but he would have a customer that would buy a lot of product and he would put it in the boot of the car. And one day the customer came back and said, you gave me terrible product, right? And right. Pasquale said, I give you the best stuff. And the guy said, I'm never coming back because you've given me bad fruit, bad vegetables. And Pasquale wondered what had happened. And it came to him that maybe I didn't put him in the boot properly, or I didn't take care with the delivery of that final product. So every time he made sure, even his son George, he'd say, make sure you put everything in the back of the car perfectly, or in the back seat. Yeah. Make sure it's stable, it doesn't move, because, we don't want any problems. So this whole thing about adapting and picking up on the nuances of your customer, I think was the critical thing for him, that he survived so long. He ended up buying the shop, buying the block, sold the block to somebody else. He only recently died last year, but, he's left a fortune to his wife, Auntie Ellie, and my cousin George. So the thing is that, coming back to your point, knowing your customer, and like the example you gave at at Subway with the foot-long crab stick sandwich, but understanding what presses their buttons. I guess that's why segmentation's exploded, in marketing,
Yeah, you don't have to agree with it. That's the big thing. I mean, I think at 19, I tried Dane's crab foot sandwich with salami. I got to tell you, it's not good. Not for me. It was one and done, but he loved it. And to your point, you understand that. You want to make sure the fruit's in the back so that he comes back. You want to understand that, those repeat customers are core to your business, because they help you. The silent marketing is them. They're going to tell their friends that, Simon's a great Subway artist, or go buy tiles from Pete, or buy bananas from Uncle Pascal. Pasquale. So I think it all comes down to, I think what we're trying to talk about, and we both agree on, is that customer interaction, knowing your customer, is one of the cornerstones of your small business.
Yep. You can't shoot fish in a barrel anymore, and you can't work on you're a sales machine, and Simon, that you can't. The arithmetic to chew through customers, so have low conversion but high volume of customer discussions, that disappears, literally overnight in this conversation, because no longer can you say, can you burn people? Because people are a bit like elephants now, and they've got online to support them,
Well, the online supports it, and that directs a lot of it.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. So I think what would be something that we'd say to somebody? What would be our takeaways? Know your customer, number one.
Know your customer. Help your team prepare for the day.
Yeah.
Would make a big number two for me, maybe borderline one. And I think the third one for me is almost the Uncle Pasquale. It's making sure it's a united what's the right word? What'd you say to him? He got all combed his hair and he was looking all professional. That wasn't the wording. I can't remember. But making sure you all look the part to do the job.
Yeah.
And we've gone to some stores together that did not look the part, A as a store and B
Oh,
with the
yeah.
person running the store. And it really puts you off going back in there. I got to tell you that the dwell time in a shopping center is growing larger and larger, and that while they may not be a customer at the moment, they're walking past your shop or into your stop several times a week or a month or a fortnight, whichever way you're breaking it down. And when those people come in, this is what we're talking about. This is how you can try and convert them into that first purchase, is knowing them, talking to them, and they may not buy that vacuum cleaner on the first time, but if you have that rapport and you're that trusted expert, the likelihood is they're going to come back to you. You should never be standing in your store with your hands in your pockets. Now, I don't think that happens these days, probably standing there with your hands on your phone. But yeah, some big pieces that were, and I use the words beaten into us because I think they pretty much were. But those things, they don't happen anymore. And you can't beat things into people, but you can have conversations in a friendly way that helps that interaction.
But that point you made about the dwell time in shopping centres is so critical, Simon, because you think about, if you go to the Paris end of a Westfield store, and you're looking at some of these upmarket brands that you research online, but there's a high level of interest. The brand is one thing that attracts you in there.
Yep.
But if you're walking there and the people look disinterested, or there's a certain nuance about that, to your point, you're not inclined to go in.
No.
And I think it's not about whether you're worthy enough to go into the store or not. It's that actual first impression, and you know this better than anybody. We talked about this ages ago, where you get those cues, which are physical cues, not verbal, but physical cues that really tell people where you're at. And I think that point that you made about going past that shop in the shopping centre where you're spending a lot of time there, you're having a coffee, either your partner or yourself are going through clothes stores or stores of interest, or you're picking up whatever it is, and then you walk past and say, geez, that person's got a bit of a sour look on their face. I don't know if I want to walk in there and talk to them about a pair of shoes that I really am interested in, but I don't know if I could sort of run the gauntlet,
Funny, right? We were in the city a while back, and I really wanted a pair of Birkenstocks, which is random. My doctor said I should get some. Can I get them from like two shops, like Platypus shoes, a few others, but there was a Birkenstock in the city.
Yeah. Wow.
Walked all the way down there. There's 3 people in that shop. Not one of them spoke to my wife or my son. They all just stood around the computer talking to themselves. We were in the shop for 15 minutes. The wife tried on a few. I couldn't find any that would fit my feet on the display. And in my head, my wife was saying, you should just go ask them. But to me, that's not retail. You should, hey, how can we help? Especially with an item that is, I think, $200, $270. And I really struggle to understand how people keep those businesses open when they're not engaging with their customer who's in the store.
I think it irks me, because I think to myself, if the owner was there,
would they be doing
if the owner was in the actual store and saw what happened, and I'm not getting on a high horse or anything like that, but if the owner was in there seeing what's happening, no wonder they're freaking about their profits. And because there are people there, and it's, I guess I'm getting a bit emotional now, Simon, because I think retail's a great vacation. People write it off as just a holding place for a job while you're looking for the other job. Yeah. But I can tell you, when you look at some of the greatest retailers in the world, they started from nothing, and they're probably the ones that are more motivated to speak to somebody, because some of the best stories I've heard of people moving into other roles is where they've done great customer service in a store somewhere, and somebody's been that impressed by them that they've gone, I really want this guy or girl for my business. I've just been sold. Imagine if I had a stable of these monsters, richest man in the world or richest woman in the world, and Yes, I'm with you. You know, you feel a bit. There's a bit of trepidation as you sit there and go, should I disturb the afternoon meeting with the simple inquiry about potentially losing $200 out of my wallet for
And
a
giving it
product
to
that I
you.
really
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
and I'll give it to you, and I'm even happy to go through shit service if I
Yeah.
get what I want.
Yeah.
Whereas, could you imagine the competitive environment you'd have if you had people, especially younger people, that were chargers and warriors going for it? And I think that that thing that I've just said is not about when we's or older generation. It's about what the hell are retailers doing today to the people coming through, the team members that are green?
Mm-hmm.
How are they coaching them to make them? Because you need selling skills and everything. You know, it's the selling skills you develop in a retail store or in a retail business or in business generally are the skills you need as a individual in life, you know.
Well, especially because the selling skills in retail, it's all conversation. It's not scripted. I mean, you might have a script around some higher end products. You know, we encountered that. But those questions are very generic. It's trying to get to understand the person's needs in a really relaxed format because they've approached you 9 times out of 10. And what I mean by that is they've walked into the store. You're not walking out of your retail store inside a shopping center trying to wave someone down 6 stores down. You know, they've walked into your point. And the those skills go a long way. You know, if I look at, you know, I spent years training SaaS salespeople, and a big piece of it selling to small business owners is just talking to them like they're a friend, because you generally are trying to be their friend to help them. If you're not trying to help them, then they're not going to buy and it's not going to go anywhere. But the thing at the moment, you're right, is that the retail leaders, whether it's I don't know if it's necessarily the owner. I don't know how disconnected the owner may be. I don't know if it's the area manager or the store manager, but it seems like to me that process of that morning huddle, that the chalkboard, as you called it, has just drifted and dropped away. I think that the limelight needs to be shifted back onto the actual core retail staff and how you can help them grow, because helping them grow lifts your business. For you to either grow it yourself, sell it, whatever your aspirational plans are for your business, you can't do that without those core retail staff.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary of where we're at. If you had to just wrap it up in your summary sheets, get to know your people, your customers. People buy people, then they buy product.
Mm-hmm.
What else would you say?
Help your staff be better.
Yeah,
I think that's my other big takeaway from it. You know, and it goes back to everything you've said from when you started in retail to what we've seen. Be there for your people, be there for your customer, know them both intimately, or not intimately, but know them both well enough that you can help influence that 1% change.
yeah, perfect.